a series of educational workshops for all students, youth, supporters, teachers, educators, self-advocates, and passionate community builders. And the workshops do take place once a month. And unfortunately, we've had a little bit of delay, but it's a long anticipated webinar and that we're very excited to share with you. And the themes, of course, are designed for like-minded youth to come together, to exchange ideas, share very powerful stories, which you'll hear more about today, learn more about creative ways to promote an inclusive Canada. So all youth with or without a disability are welcome to join these conversations, and you really are the leaders that we're looking for. So hats off to you for taking time out of your day. I know it's summer, but we're really happy that you took time out of your day to have a very important conversation with us. So with that note, I'd like to sort of give a quick intro to our wonderful Youth Advisory Committee. So they do work very closely with the Reaction for Inclusion team, and they're a provincial body of youth all across from the province, at least in Ontario, that really inform the work that we do at CLO. So this dedicated sort of team provides the recommendations and informs all of the work that CLO does in terms of making sure that youth's voices are heard and they're engaged to the maximum and to our utmost potential. So Community Living Ontario really does value the experience of youth in Ontario, and we really do value our time and network with our Youth Advisory Committee to plan for opportunities like today in order to sort of support youth community builders, and of course, always breaking down barriers to inclusion. So our motto with the Youth Advisory Committee is for youth, by youth. This is definitely a youth-led organization, and all the sort of input and programming that's being done is all by the youth advisor. So without further ado, I'm going to allow Nicole, Alexandra, and Sarah to sort of introduce themselves today. But before then, we're going to do a quick little video on what the Disrupt series looked like, and specifically what Reaction for Inclusion really means to all of us.
When you look at someone who has a disability, what do you see?
What do you see?
What do you see?
What do you see?
A person to feel sorry for?
Someone who will never really grow up?
Or someone that's just different?
The truth is, there are lots of misconceptions about young people who have an intellectual disability.
And they can be very hurtful.
But having a disability doesn't make you less capable.
It definitely doesn't define what I can do in my life.
Youth with disabilities are just like you and I.
We want and deserve the same thing as everyone else.
To fall in love.
To fall in love.
To fall in love.
To fall in love.
To be passionate about our work.
To have friends.
To have friends to party with.
Friends to party with.
To feel independent.
It's up to all Canadians.
It's up to all Canadians.
It's up to all Canadians.
To create a country.
To create a country where
people with and without disabilities
can thrive
and be their true authentic selves.
Sometimes all it takes is getting to know someone.
Be curious.
Change your way of thinking.
Change your way of thinking.
And see how we're really not so different from each other after all.
When I look in the mirror,
I see a capable young adult.
A creative, enthusiastic community leader.
Someone with a bright future ahead of them.
Someone with a bright future ahead of them.
I see someone with a bright future right ahead of them.
Can you see it too?
Can you also see it?
Join the movement.
Join the movement.
Join the movement.
We are citizens with a cause.
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 We are Reaction for Inclusion.
We are Reaction for Inclusion.
We are Reaction for Inclusion.
Well, thank you so much for everyone for sort of watching that video. That really sort of puts a great summary to what Reaction for Inclusion and the Youth Advisory Committee stand for. I think just before
the video.
I thank you. No, we really do appreciate that. But I think just before I sort of hand it over to our eager youth advisors, I just want to quickly go over a couple of Zoom functions. So you'll notice that either at the top bar of your screen, or at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that there's a mute button. So when you click that mute button, you'll be able to speak and everyone will be able to hear your audio. And you can also click it again and it'll mute yourself again. So you won't be able to have everyone hear your background noise. If you ever feel the need to stop your video or pause your video, there's also a button right next to the mute button. It looks sort of like a videographer camera. Feel free to sort of click that button if you just want to pause your video. And then of course, whenever you feel comfortable, you can also click that videographer sort of camera button again, and you'll be able to share your video again. At the top, you also see two little person marks, and that sort of goes over our participants, how many of us are currently in this call. And right next to that, you'll see a chat box. And the chat box has a little bit of a message icon. And that message icon really is where if you just click on it, you'll be able to chat with all of us in the room. So in the chat box, right at the bottom of the sort of white panel rectangle that you might see, you'll be able to notice that you can send a message to everyone. So you can click through the sort of scrolling list of participants and you'll be able to click and send message to everybody. Or if you want to send a specific message to somebody in there, you can also do that as well. And then I think outside of that, that will sort of be the only functions that you will need today. But at any time during our webinar today, if you are sort of having a little bit of troubles or any difficulties with the Zoom function, feel free to sort of unmute yourself, or I know that there might be a function where you can react. So the reaction functions allow you to sort of raise your hand. And there's a little bit of icons. You might be able to see it on Nicole's screen right now. She has a cute little heart there. Alex has a thumbs up. So anytime you sort of click any of those emojis, it'll pop up on your screen and we'll be able to see sort of what your feelings are. So at any point, if you don't feel like sort of unmuting for a response or commenting something in the chat box and you just want to sort of react to show your love, feel free to sort of use the reaction emojis to sort of express your feelings. But I think on that note, that is all for now. And I think without further ado, I'm going to hand it over
When you look at some
to the youth advisors to sort of do their wonderful introduction. So take it away.
Hi, I'm Nicole Canzaneri. I'm the current chair of the Youth Advisory Committee, and you might hear us refer to it as YAC quite a bit, YAC. So if you hear that, that's what we mean. I'm the current chair. I'm 21 years old, and I'm studying disability studies at the University of Windsor. I'm really passionate about inclusion, accessibility, and community engagement. A fun fact about me is I hope to study law one day and work in policy related to disability and inclusion and community engagement. I'm so excited to be here today to explore youth activism with all of you. So thank you so much for coming.
Hello everyone, my name is Sarah and I'm 18 years old and I'm approaching my second year in the concurrent education program with psychology and early childhood education at the University of Windsor. After my studies, I hope to become a teacher because I really love learning and I love education, and I also love working with youth. A fun fact about me is that I love cooking and baking. In fact, that I won a chili cook-off, which I'm super happy about. I am super excited to be here today and share my love and passion for activism.
Hi, I'm Alex Snyder. I'm an advisor with the Youth Advisory Committee, and I'm a member of the siblings group at CLO. So I'm 19 years old, and I'm entering my second year of my studies in journalism at the University of Moncton. Fun fact about me is that I work at a French newspaper in Barrie during the summer. So if you're ever walking around Barrie and you see somebody with a camera and a notepad, it might be me. I'm so happy to be here with you all to share my passion for youth activism. And then we'll pass it over to Sarah for the land acknowledgement.
So once again, I'm Sarah Julius. I'm a youth advisor for the Reaction for Inclusion, a youth advisory committee, and I am based in Windsor, Ontario. So I would like to acknowledge the land that I'm on. While it's a well-traveled land, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which I gather on today is the traditional territory of the three Fires Confederacies of First Nations comprised of the Ojibwe, the Dawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. I'm grateful to work, learn, and live in this area. We acknowledge the settler-indigenous relationship is deeply wounded, and it is our responsibility to work towards making it right. We hope to reflect on the history of colonization in our own area and to reflect on how this affects our relationships with all living beings. We will now like to start off with the icebreaker session, and I hand it over to my friend and youth advisor, Alex.
Thanks, Sarah. So hi, everyone. I'm Alex, and today I'll be leading us through our icebreaker activity on Slido. So Slido is a Q&A platform that we'll be using to ask you 2 discussion questions. Some of you may be familiar with Slido, but if not, here is a quick rundown. So we'll just send the Slido link into the chat. Please click on the link and enter the password #YAC, all in upper capital letters, and it will take you to our polling screen. For today's icebreaker, we'll have 2 questions for you that will come onto your screen once you access into the Slido platform. And once you've started the poll, you will see the first question on the screen, like you do on our Zoom meeting. So our first question is, what comes to mind when you think of the word youth? So I just want to make sure that, so it's #YAC, all in upper letters. I want to make sure that everyone got through to Slido.
So YAC?
Yeah, Nicole just sent it in the chat, so maybe you can copy paste that into the Slido app. So is everyone okay with the Slido platform? Are there any problems? Okay.
Yep, is everybody able to sort of access Slido? So on our screen, it says it's app.sli.do. And if you don't want to sort of do it on your laptop that you're sort of zooming in from, feel free to sort of pick up your phones and do it on your phones as well. And if you're doing it on your phone or your laptop, you'll see a quick little sort of blurb that comes right up on the screen, and it'll ask you for a code. So the code, you won't need to put a hashtag in, because the hashtag, you'll notice, is at the front of the blurb that comes up. The little sort of, I believe it's a white and blue rectangular blurb that comes up. You just have to type in YAC, and you'll be able to sort of enter. And once I sort of get confirmation that everybody's Slidos are working and they're sort of good to go, then we'll start with our icebreaker activity. So in the meantime, if anybody's having any trouble, feel free to sort of put your questions in the chat box or unmute yourself and sort of shout your questions at us, and we'll try to help you as soon as possible. Okay, on that note, we're actually going to get started with our Slido activity. And again, if you're actually struggling to get on Slido, what you actually can do now is there is a little bit of a, you might see, it looks like a QR code. It is a QR code, but for anybody who doesn't know what a QR code is, at the top left of the screen, you see a little bit of a white and black fuzzy little picture with a lot of tiny little squares. That's a QR code, and feel free to sort of take your phone camera and just hover over the QR code, and you'll be able to notice the link comes up right away. Click that link and then type in YAC. But I'm going to let Alex take it away with our 2 questions for today.
I'll actually take it away for our 2 questions for today. So when we're talking about what comes to mind when you think of the word youth, so let's look at what's coming up. Young, eager, passionate, happy, learning, energetic, fun, teenagers, future. I loved that. Big and bright in the middle. Lots of different, very positive words. Potentiality, creative, energy, new ideas. These look wonderful. Again, love, very big, very positive. Potentiality, yeah. Energetic, yes. I like how future is still in the middle. Ambitious, that goes along with a lot of the other words. Passionate kind of connects to the drive a lot of youth have. Creative, inspired, I like that one a lot. Inspired. Ambition, yes. Younger people with lots of potential to learn. Yes, there's always room. Very nice. Energetic, love. I love the words that we're seeing so big and bright, because that's truly a very positive reflection of what you guys think of youth. Very good. Tech savvy. Yeah, we get that one a lot. Very nice. Play. The change we await to see. I love that one. Open-minded. Learning. Very nice. Very nice. Oh, another one coming in. I have to find it. Smart. I'll take that one. Yeah, thank you. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Oh, still coming in. Awesome. Willing to learn. Passionate. Future community builder. Love that. Inquisitive. I like that. Always asking questions. That works with a lot of the other words here. Drive. Eager. A new voice of change. Very much in line with what we're talking about today. Love that. Very good. Optimistic. Energy. New ideas. Happy. Joyful. Imaginative. Very good. And again, I love our focus word here, future. Very good. The change we wait to see. I love. Future community builder. Again, amazing. Okay, if everyone's had a chance to put in their thoughts. I can't find the new one. But yes, lots of very positive ones, lots of ones that are synonyms, very similar to each other. So that's wonderful to see your reflection of youth. We also have one more question for you with the same thing. And surprise, surprise, it is what comes to mind when you think of the word activism. So please do the same thing you just did. I promise this is the last interactive part for everyone. It's just we want to see what you guys think of these two words. Advocating, change, activity, yeah. Taking a stand, yeah. Inclusion, change makers, conviction, inclusivity, powerful. I love these words. Community improvement, change, oh, nice and big, change, I love it. Being the underdog, a process. Disruptors, I'm going to take that in a positive way. Making the world a better place. Fighting for your beliefs. Improvement, making the world. Resilience, a process. Social justice, climate change. Having a voice, yes. Change the environment. Determination. Advocating, resilience. I see a lot of similarities in some of the words here, just like we did. And again, we have a nice big center word, change. Fighting for your beliefs. Representation, activity, conviction. Willing to break the status quo. Oh, I feel like you read into our slideshow already. That is so perfect for this one. Change makers. Freedom. Learning. Yeah. A lot of amazing ones here. So thank you guys for sharing your thoughts here. It's great for us to know going into this what comes to mind when you think of youth and activism, and we're putting it together today, youth activism. So thank you guys for participating in that. I really appreciate it. And now I'll pass it off to Alex.
Thank you so much for participating in our icebreaker. We now know what everyone thinks of when we think of these words, and this will help us understand the different ways that youth activism presents itself. So I'll now hand it over to my friend, Nicole.
I'm back. Okay, so if we're going at the dictionary definition, you're going to find Cambridge Dictionary defines activism as the use of direct and noticeable action to achieve a result, usually a political or social one. So I like looking at the highlighted words here: direct, noticeable action, achieve, result, political, social, all themes that we kind of saw with our words as well. But activism can mean so many things. As there's no perfect definition of activism, there's also no perfect activist. So there's so many other things to consider: privilege, demographic factors, access to resources. But we want to talk as youth advisors about how we see activism. So my two co-hosts here can explain how they see activism.
So for me, I see activism as occurs when individuals intervene in issues of social, political, economic, or environmental concern. These individuals speak up against these issues and are determined to bring about change for the greater good. So depending on the issue, they may be fighting for human rights such as education, clean water, fighting racism, or fighting on behalf of our planet, such as, trying to educate people and make people aware of climate change and global warming and extinctions of animals, and even advocating for our own mental health. As activists, we strive to create a society that treats everyone equally, is free from challenges and barriers, and where everyone can reach their full potential.
For me, activism is seeing an injustice or a problem in society and acting to solve this problem and to help make a difference. So this action can be personal, just starting with yourself, within the community, or with the government and organizations at huge scale. But for me, no matter the scale, just acting to make a change makes you an activist. I'll pass it over to Nicole.
Thank you so much. So as the chair of YAC, I'm going to go with how we define and frame activism. So there's 4 pillars in mind that we keep in mind. Be informed, seek authenticity, imagine better, and act intentionally. And I'm going to explain those just super quick. So when I say be informed, educating others on the lived experience of youth who have an intellectual disability gives community members and anyone involved a greater capacity to identify the impact of the experiences for this youth with a disability and the experiences for youth without a disability. And by raising the consciousness of others altogether, we create a space that's fueled by collaboration so we can begin to shift the culture. So it starts with being informed. When we're talking about seeking authenticity, so being authentic with others requires that we see everyone's gifts and foster relationships, not because, oh, maybe we should, because we have a genuine interest in one another. Authentic inclusion requires that we assume everyone here is competent to contribute to change in the communities as well. So in doing so, with this mindset, communities become grounded in a culture that provides equitable and equal access for people who have an intellectual disability. So when we're authentic, we create the most authentic change. When we're talking about imagining better, so refusing to accept the status quo, that was in there somewhere. So you read my mind. To do this, it allows us to envision a future where people are empowered to live the life that they dream for themselves, not what society expects. The youth are the here and now. I think you all agreed on that in your word descriptions. We're the here and now, and we have the ability to challenge these limiting attitudes of the past and old ways. We also have the potential to ignite the momentum that can bring about this change. So we have to imagine better to create better. And then finally, acting intentionally. So by thinking critically about the way that we perceive others and being mindful of possible biases we have or biases other people have, when we're attentive to these things and we notice what's influencing us, we can work to make meaningful decisions and act with a greater awareness overall. And we can be aware of the potential consequences of choices we make when we are not acting intentionally. So I know that's a lot, but with these 4 key pillars in mind, we can engage youth both on a personal level, like for example, one-to-one conversation, fostering an environment where this conversation can happen, or on a provincial level with large-scale outreach. And that's kind of what we're doing here today on the provincial level. That's the R4I reaction for inclusion, and it looks different for everyone. I'm wondering if anyone here can think of examples of how it looks different depending on who you are. How does activism look different? You can put it in the chat, you can raise your hand, you can just speak it out loud. Any thoughts?
I can start. I think for youth, they may face challenges such as people not taking them seriously because they're so young.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, because like I agree with you there, whoever said that. Because like I'm noticing that there's been multiple poaching problems in Africa, and the American people are not noticing.
Yeah, depending on where we're located, activism, we can have different focuses and different things that we're passionate about. That's a great point. And we're going to talk about this more about how it's different. So if there's any last minute comments, feel free. But if not, we can move on to another discussion around this.
I'm noticing a comment that reads, but youth are powerful with marches and movements. I completely agree. It looks very different for everyone, but I think a common way that youth come together is through the marches and the movements and protests. So that's a great tip. It's a great way to sort of bring some common ground, even though all of us coming in are coming from very different perspectives. We all have that sort of common space to work on. So I love that comment. Thank you for sharing. But I think now we're gonna move forward with our panel discussion. Our youth activists around the world. Sorry, I'm just getting too eager to the panel discussion because I can't wait for all of you to sort of share your opinions. But I'm gonna hand it back to the youth advisors, and they're gonna take us through what youth activism really looks like all around the world. We just talked about how it looks different for everybody. We're just gonna now highlight it with different examples that we've decided to highlight today.
Yeah, so Malala, a lot of you have probably heard of her. To sum it up very quickly, she's done so much, but she is a youth from Pakistan, and she spoke out publicly on behalf of girls for the right to learn and to attend school, which was not a right. And because of this, she was targeted. She was shot. They tried to finish her, but she miraculously survived, recovered, and that made her an even stronger advocate with the goal of having each and every girl in the world allowed to attend school. And I'm sure many of you have read her book and heard of her, and she's inspired so many other people to join her fight. But when we consider Malala as a youth activist, we have other things to consider and reflect upon, like privilege, for example, cultural differences, and gender inequalities, which, as Matthew pointed out, it's different for every person where you are. She became an advocate just by simply existing as a woman who wanted to attend school, something we take for granted, for privilege here. Just by simply existing as a woman, getting an education, she became a youth activist and a target.
Okay, this is Autumn Pelche. She's a 17-year-old Canadian water activist who advocates for clean drinking water in First Nation communities in Canada and across the globe. She comes from the Wilklinkong First Nation area and is from Ojibwe. Autumn has traveled across Canada and the globe to carry the message of the importance of clean drinking water and how sacred it is. At just 12 years old, in 2016, she spoke to Justin Trudeau and criticized his failure in ensuring clean water for First Nations people in Canada. In addition, she also had the opportunity to speak at several United Nations conferences where people heard her voice, heard her talk, and advocate for clean drinking water for her people. In addition, since 2019, she has been given the title as the Chief Water Commissioner, so the new water walker of her people. And she has had many accolades bestowed upon her, such as the Sorvin Medal for Volunteers, the Ontario Junior Citizen, the We Day Award for Youth in Action, and the 2021 Revolution Her Community Vision Youth Award. So over the past 5 years, 132 long-term drinking advisories have been lifted in Canada due to her impact, due to her using her voice and standing up and creating change. So while taking her advocacy to a federal level, Autumn also challenged systemic racism against Indigenous people and the colonialist issues that existed long before she was even born. So she addressed issues that have occurred and have been existed and prevalent way before she was born. And she's really young, she's 17. Unfortunately, there are still water drinking advisories in Canada, but Autumn still continues to fight for clean water in Canada and on Earth.
This is Greta Thunberg. She's a 19-year-old Swedish activist. So she has been passionate about climate change ever since she was young. So she started making changes in her own life that were more environmentally conscious. So for example, she became vegan, and she chose to push her government to change and create policy for climate change. So she started missing school and stood in front of her parliament with a sign that said "School Strike for Climate." In 2018, her individual act led to an international event as people around the world joined her strike. And now there are Fridays for Future, which are strikes on Friday in schools all around the world, so even in Canada and a lot in Europe. Also, Greta Thunberg has Asperger's syndrome, and she has raised awareness for Asperger's through her work around the world. She became known for her hard-hitting speeches that are honest, and she was brave and upfront with world leaders. But of course, some leaders discredited her because of her age. But regardless of that, she continues to raise her voice and inspired many people to join her fight. So things to consider with her are certainly privilege and ageism, because there were certainly older leaders who discredited her. But regardless of that, she kept on fighting.
So we're going to do a quick reflection just to give everybody a chance to sort of reflect on the three world global youth activists that we just sort of discussed. So we know we talked about sort of differences that you see in activism for everyone, but specifically, what differences do you see in each youth activist? And in terms of the topics that we talked about, for example, privilege, discrimination, ageism, how does our background and our personal identities change the way that we're able to access and engage in youth activism? So I can give a quick example for me. Personally, I think my background as an immigrant, person of color, and also a woman did help and also stop me from engaging in youth activism as early as I wanted to, because I was scared of sort of being up in the front and exposing myself in front of leaders when I know there's issues like racism, racial prejudice, and just a lot of prejudice against women, immigrants, and of course, people of color. So all three of that sort of combines together in what we like to refer to as intersectionality. So a lot of those three components work together to sort of discriminate youth even more. So that's just a personal experience of mine. I was just wondering whether anybody else has a little bit to share. I know there's some in the chat, which I can quickly get into.
Okay, I think I know three things. One, so far.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. Anyway, so one girl is so far, I know there's like three advocates and they're all girls. One girl, one of them is at least one that is a Pakistan girl who wants to at least have girls in school. The other, the second one really, is Canadian, yet she is in Canada criticizing Justin Trudeau for lack of clean water. The third one, Greta Thunberg, which I really know in my book, is known for environmental changes. I managed to summarize all together. And to be honest, Greta's my hero so far. Mainly due to the fact that I've got some traits of the animalistic kind of thing. Mainly due to the fact that I care for nature and animals too. And the fact that poachers and climate change and pollution just disgusts me.
That is such a good point, Matthew. Where we're at in our life reflects on who we connect with most. So you said Greta because that's your passion, and that's an absolutely wonderful point. Whereas someone who may be an immigrant, who may be Pakistani, would connect more with Malala and other examples. So that's a great point about how who we are reflects who inspires us. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for understanding.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I acknowledge too, as a white woman, I come from a huge place of privilege that I'll get more attention. I'll be listened to. Like there's systematic studies that white women have it easier than women of color. Like, yeah, I'm still a woman, but it's not the same for all women. So I acknowledge that in my activism, that not every space is my space to take, you know? And that's personally for me.
I agree. It seems that way for nearly, so us whites are a bit lucky, but other colors hardly stand a chance. And I can't sometimes feel sorry for other colors. Like, come on, we're all whites, and yet we've got Sir Julius. And to be honest, I rather like the differences, because instead of just all white, there's a couple of black people. And I don't mind that. I don't mind it at all.
You're right. The more diverse group we have making discussions makes it a better discussion. So I know Sarah, I've known her for a while. I know what she brings to the table as a woman of color. And it's completely different from what I might bring or from when you might bring. So that's a great point, Matthew. Thank you.
Precisely.
Is there anyone else who has a reflection about themselves as an activist or the three we talked about? You can put it in the chat too if you want.
Oh yeah, I actually have one. So if we look at like social media and such, we can see different forms of activism. And an example I do want to bring up, and I want to be careful, this is a freedom convoy, because specifically, we actually saw youth engaging in that, either opposed to it or for it. We actually saw youth involved in that, advocating against the so-called, what they called, unscientific mandates. And we did see that. As much as people may disagree with them, that is a form of activism. We must acknowledge that, including youth. As much as people disagree with it, that is a perfect example.
Exactly. Not all activism is for everyone. You can completely disagree with a form of activism, but you're right. By blocking streets and by gathering and by having a message together, that is a form of activism, whether you like it or not. So that's a really interesting point to bring up, Cameron. I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
Okay, I know we've had a lot of time to sort of reflect and sort of ponder on our ideas, and I really do appreciate everybody for tuning in and listening in, and as well for everybody who was very brave to share your own experiences. Thank you so much for, taking us through your own opinions and your own feelings regarding the reflection question that we have up here. But we're going to get started with what I'm most excited for. So we're going to get started with our personal story panel discussion. So just to give a quick brief outline, our three youth advisors are going to be extremely brave and open up about their experiences engaging in youth activism. Of course, YAC itself is a great platform to get started with youth activism, which I'm doing a little teaser because we're going to get into that very, very soon after our panel. But right now, what they'd like to do is sort of share their really personal and intimate stories with all of us and really take us through the ups and downs of their own personal experiences engaging in activism as a youth. We've already mentioned that, and I think everyone can sort of tell that there's good and bad when it comes to sort of expressing ourselves, especially as a youth activist. So they're really going to take us through their own personal stories. So I really ask everybody to be respectful and kind to our our youth advisors, Nicole, Alex, and Sarah, it really is a brave act to sort of open up about their own personal stories. So I want to just put it out there to be kind and respectful to all individuals on this call. And I will sort of be asking them with a little bit of follow-up questions just to see what it was like when they were experiencing what they were experiencing with the certain story that they're going to be explaining to us. And so what I ask from the audience is, if you have any pressing questions, which I'm sure you will, after every single one of their stories, we'll have a quick little question period to sort of discuss and talk about what it was like, to sort of go through the experiences that they had and sort of understand where they're coming from. So I ask that you save your questions, or if you sort of don't want to forget it, just put your questions in the chat box and we'll be monitoring it and we'll ask the questions for you that way. So I ask that you be respectful and have them provide them the time to sort of share their own opinions and their lived experiences, and then we'll get into question period. So that'll happen after each one of our youth advisors, and then in the end we're going to have an overall discussion with one another. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing just so that we can all see all of our lovely faces instead of the slideshow in the middle. But on that note, I think the youth advisors, I don't want to take any more time off of your hands, but you can get started with the sort of intimate discussion that we're going to have today.
Yeah, thank you so much for that acknowledgement that it's a lot to share your personal story. So like Shreya said, please be kind. So I'm going to talk about a time that wasn't so great for my youth activism. I'm 21 now. I've been doing this since I was 13 or 14. So I've had lots of good, lots of bad, but I think this one's important. So I went to high school. In grade 9, I saw a gap between social and school opportunities for students who had disabilities. Even though it was an integrated school, there was segregation very clearly still. Clubs and teams didn't even consider the possibility that a disabled person could even be considering joining. It was so far-fetched that it didn't even have to be addressed. It wasn't even an issue brought up yet. So as a young kid doing my first thing, I was looking for what I could do to close this gap on more than just a personal level. And I leaned on one teacher who I'm so lucky to have. That was a privilege, to support me to find something to do. So what we did together was we created a chapter for Best Buddies at my school. And that was the only chapter we've had before. It was the newest one. But instead of the traditional Best Buddies where you're one-on-one partnered in outings, I wanted it to be like a club, like the clubs the disabled students weren't allowed to join or weren't included in. So what we did was a lot of outings and group events. And one of my good friends who I met through this club is here today too. So all these years later, that's the impact it's had. So it wasn't just for youth with a disability though, it was for anyone. And it wasn't specified you have to be in the spec ed program to come on by, but I was making sure it was accessible to every student there. But during this time, I had to run every idea through administration and through my principals. And though they're lovely principals, lovely administration, they didn't see the problems I saw. It wasn't as glaring in their face because of the place of privilege they came from. So everything I wanted to do was a battle. I kept getting excuses like, oh, no, we don't have the money for that. Or no, that space, like we can't rent that gym space, I'm sorry. Or no, you can't do that during school hours. We can't miss classes. But it's painfully ironic because every other club, which was inaccessible, had these privileges of getting the gym for pep rallies, leaving school early for football games, and no hate to all of that, but it's very clearly possible. It just was so deeply rooted in the culture that this isn't a serious thing, that it wasn't getting the same attention. So as 14 years old, I was pretty scared. And I started kind of to believe what every adult except one was hinting at, that it wasn't this important. And maybe I'm making it a big deal, and maybe it should just be a little lunch club. And I did what I could. I did what I could as a scared 14-year-old. We had a lot of fun, but still we had to fight tooth and nail every time. And so without this one teacher, it would have been a failure. But even with this one teacher, it was still a relatively negative experience, because looking back, oh my God, we could have done so much more. Not even just me. We had so many students ready to go, and we didn't have the chance to give them that space. So I wanted to do more, but I wasn't taken seriously enough or listened to. So that's my story from quite a few years back, but it highlights a bit more of the negative side of being a really young youth activist.
Yeah, Nicole, I really want to say thank you so much for sharing. I think from the content of your story, there's so much passion and also upset and sort of feelings of fear and sadness that are sort of very intertwined in your story. And it does take a lot for you to sort of open up and express yourself. And I completely agree. Screw segregation. I completely agree with that statement. It really does suck. And unfortunately, it still does exist. So there's sort of, I enjoy the fact that you sort of highlighted that to sort of acknowledge the fact that it does exist. I know a lot of people might sort of go on about and ignore it, but it definitely does exist. And so that was really, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for expressing yourself. And of course, being vulnerable in front of, a lot of new people and talking about sort of your experiences. Before I sort of get into my question, I see that Jade has a question, and I would love for, Jade, if you feel comfortable unmuting yourself, go ahead and mute yourself and sort of ask your question for Nicole.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Nicole, for sharing and for your activism. I know you mentioned something about principals and other teachers having their own, biases and privileges that they couldn't see what issues that you saw. So I guess I wanted to ask, how do you become more aware of your own biases, and what can you do to kind of become more open-minded, I guess?
That is a great question. So it's different for everyone. My personal journey as living in Windsor and having the family I had and the connections I had, I was exposed to a lot of things at a young age and didn't form biases because of the environment. But sometimes where you're at, it's really hard to look at yourself and say, oh, I'm missing something, or I'm thinking negatively about a group I shouldn't. So from what I enjoy, I would say reading, say YouTube, say just searching, like, oh, I see a mosque down the street. I don't really know what that is. I don't really know how that works. Why is it busy on Fridays? I thought church is on Sundays for Christians. Like, look at it, find something that brings you have a question about, and find a way that you enjoy to learn about it. So for me, it was a lot of classes in school, religion class. I love to learn about. Some people, it's YouTube. YouTube has so many amazing resources. So I think the first step is kind of looking at what you have questions about. Like if you were put on a hot seat, like what religion wears a turban? And you're like, oh, I don't know. That's a great place to kind of start. From my experience, but it's different for everyone. But adults definitely have the resources at their fingertips. A lot of school staff has PA days that are mandatory. There's opportunities to always ask more. They have students who are diverse. So from a school perspective, there's a lot of resources within their own building as well. You might not even have to go out. But I hope I answered your question. But it's so different for everyone. But there's so many resources. You just got to find the questions you have first.
Yes, you did answer my question. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Jade. I see another hand up. Feel free, turn your mic on. Let's talk.
I know you mentioned that you found there was a lot of pushback or struggle with school administration. In retrospect of your experiences, how do you feel, or what would you have done differently, or what would have you, how would you have differently chosen to approach administration and getting that kind of, not leniency, but that equitable like privilege with other clubs?
Thank you for that question, because I think about that a lot too. In the school setting, it's difficult. There's a lot of structures that we have to follow sometimes. But I think Nicole should have been a little less scared, or told someone I was scared. But you kind of going on what I was going to say next, like be loud and proud. If you think there's something wrong, you're probably not hallucinating unless that's a thing for you. So trust in your gut, trust being like, man, why isn't my friend allowed to do this? Why didn't they send that email out to the spec ed students as well? That's my personal. And trust in your gut. So it's different in every school, like the systems and how they work, but loud and proud in the chat, you got it. That's, if you walk in with the confidence, if you fake it till you make it, if you have the confidence that I am seeing an issue, I'm not making it up, it's not being addressed, I wouldn't know exactly how to talk. I don't know how exactly I would have talked to the principal. I don't know word for word what I would have done different, but I would have gone in there a lot more hot and a lot more passionate than doubting myself. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think the questions have been amazing. You took my words right out of my mouth. I'm sort of left speechless now. But if we don't have sort of current questions right now for Nicole, we can always move on to our next youth advisor to share their personal and intimate story. And of course, again, we will have a lot of sort of downtime to just have some sort of networking and kind of a social session where we just talk about whatever's on your mind after our session. So if there's something sort of in the back of your head that you sort of remember near the end of the session or in the middle of the session, of course, like I've mentioned before, feel free to use the chat box. But without sort of taking away any more time, Matthew, seems like you have a question. Take it right out of my head, but go for it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because like there's just this thought inside my head where some people are just like segregating each other, and I'm just supposed to be segregated, and when they're just threatening me with a small Nerf gun, oh please, mine's bigger.
There is some different approaches to handling segregation, and I see you chose yours. So very nice Nerf gun. Very nice Nerf gun.
Yeah, I've got a bigger one too. Oh shoot.
We know how Matthew's going to deal with school segregation. I want you on my team. Thank you, Matthew.
Totally. I wish.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Matthew. But I think Alex actually has a little bit of a short story to share for us as well. So take it away, Alex.
Well, first, thank you, Nicole. All your ideas and suggestions were amazing. So my journey with youth activism started ever since I was really young, because inclusion has always been really important for me because my sister has Down syndrome. And I volunteered with organizations like Special Olympics and Best Buddies and local Down syndrome organizations to help provide services for people with intellectual disabilities. And as a sister, I always wanted to support my sister and help amplify her voice in my family or my community. So in 2021, I was graduating high school and I was having to move away pretty far for school. And I was getting really stressed about leaving home and how my relationship with my sister would develop in the future and how her supports would be like at home as well. So luckily, right around that time, I found a siblings workshop with CLO. And that was the first time I'd ever found a community of siblings like me. And we were all like-minded and passionate about inclusion and advocacy and supporting siblings. So in talking, we also found a lot of common ground on lack of supports for us. So we found that a lot of us have concerns about future and financial planning and caretaking and housing and all of these things that are never addressed and are considered things that parents should worry about. But as siblings, we still worry about it. And we're told, no, it's not for you, don't think about it. But at any moment, it could be for us to worry about. It could be an issue for us that we have to deal with. So from this workshop, I joined a group and we were making a report of recommendations regarding siblings of people with disabilities. And I joined this project because I felt like I could really make a difference in this group by sharing my ideas. So I helped create this report, I practiced, and finally we got to present our recommendations to the Provincial Minister of Children, Community, and Social Services. So we're really passionate and determined, and we really seemed to leave an impact on these ministers because we spoke honestly and shared our stories. But just a few weeks after, the cabinet was reshuffled, so a new minister came in, and essentially our advocacy was totally stopped on that end. So it was really discouraging, and it felt like all of that work went to nothing. We saw this great report, but we hadn't made the impact that we wanted. So at that point, it was really disappointing because it felt like that avenue was closed to us. But after a while, I reflected and I realized that that's not the only way that I can make a difference. You know, I still found this amazing community, and there's still siblings who need support and resources. And I realized that we can support siblings directly through the community. So I took all this passion and I transferred that to directly supporting siblings with sibling meetups that we created. So specifically safe meeting spaces for siblings. So that's where I channeled all my energy in the spring. And so despite this setback, I chose to concentrate on my passion, start a new project. And well, now we're really excited because although this this path of advocacy was kind of close to us, we can still come back to it. And we have this really strong project now. Also, sorry if you guys heard the phone in the background.
Oh my God, thank you, Alex, for sharing. That was such a wonderful story. And I definitely very much resonate with sort of being able to pick yourself up after you sort of feel a loss, or sort of a loss in movement, at least, because at least with your story, you know, that report really took you places, especially with, you know, being able to speak with a minister. That is such a huge deal. And so when you have sort of things that are out of your control, because of the fact that, you know, ministries sort of shuffling their roles, that's sort of definitely outside of our control. So being able to sort of be resilient and sort of push through and come forward after that point is something that I really admire and appreciate. And especially with what I know about the siblings meetup, I had no idea that was the history behind it. So what a great pivot, and truly, like, I can't do anything but sort of glean and sort of I'm in so much pride of how you sort of navigated and took that situation with grace and with power. I think my sort of question to you would be, if you could do anything differently when you were sort of feeling that in a little bit of a stump, or that little low point that you sort of discussed, what would you sort of tell Alex from a couple years ago when she was sort of going through that situation? What would you tell her to sort of help her get through that situation like you did with the resiliency?
Yeah, I would tell her that there's so many ways to make a difference. And at the time, I was so focused. And from what I see in media, usually it's like, you know, you go to the government if you want to make a difference. But I would have told myself that there's so many other great things that you can do. And there's also so many other great causes that you can get involved with. And also to tell myself that I think at the time I was also a bit intimidated and more quiet than I should have been. So I told myself that, you know, you are a great activist and you have great ideas and perspectives. So, you know, don't be afraid to really speak up and say what you want.
The words right out of my mouth, Nicole.
No, for sure. That was like, what an amazing outlook to sort of take on, especially with the fact, like, we've already addressed sort of the ups and a lot of the downs that youth face when they're sort of trying to have their voices heard and have them represented. So I really do appreciate your intimate story and sharing that with us, because I know that that's not easy to do. I was just wondering whether anybody have any questions. I know there's a lot of praise for Alex, which I always love to see, because all our youth advisors are so well deserving of the praise and the love that you're sharing in the chat. So we really do appreciate that. But I think if there's no current questions right now, like I mentioned, we'll have a section later to sort of chat. But I know Sarah's been dying to sort of share her story as well, to help inspire us and continue the sort of inspiring conversation that we're having right now. So I will mute myself and let Sarah sort of continue.
Thank you so much. And to my fellow like YAC advisors and friends, Nicole and Alex, amazing stories. And I'm always inspired by both of you. So my activism journey started in the fall of 2020 when I was in grade 12. So it's been a while, So this was the very beginning of the pandemic when most things were shut down and there were no extracurricular activities or sports happening at school. And this was very hard for me because I love getting involved in my school community. I especially love getting involved in clubs such as the Social Justice League and Best Buddies. And these are projects that were very important to me. So when I found out that I couldn't participate in these due to the pandemic, I was very upset. So I didn't know that despite these unprecedented times, there was a silver lining, and that silver lining was a chance to participate in something bigger and something that could benefit my community in a big way. So I got the chance to be part of a change project called Voices of Tomorrow. This is a project based in the Windsor, Essex area, which has a strong passion to ensure youth of all abilities get to experience meaningful employment. We formed this project to understand that the real problem that most youth face when it comes to finding meaningful employment. The problem is that all youth of all abilities often face several barriers and lack the voice to represent what it means to find meaningful employment and co-op opportunities. So to solve this problem, we created a survey for students in secondary and post-secondary school, teachers and educators, and employers. We really wanted to ensure that everybody in this situation had their voices heard and were able to contribute in creating change and making employment a good experience for youth. We gave it to youth because we wanted to see what their thoughts were and how they were finding the employment for them. We gave it to teachers and educators because they do play a role in giving co-op opportunities and assisting students in finding these jobs. And we gave it to employers because we wanted to know if they needed any help or assistance in getting resources and how to serve their employees. So we believe that hearing these voices allowed us to see what problems were present so that we can take on the next steps to solve these problems. Our survey, we were able to get 143 responses from the community. I'll be able to show this survey later in this presentation, but I find that both the report and findings really nicely reflected the views of those surveyed. It displayed the thoughts and feelings of students, teachers, and employers when it comes to hiring youth of all abilities in the workplace. And I think it's crucial to take into consideration how students, teachers, and employers feel in order to understand where we are at and what needs to be done to ensure an inclusive workplace for all students, ensure teachers have the needs met, and ensure that employers have the proper tools and resources to have a smooth transition for the youth they hire. That is all for today.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing that. And I can't imagine how difficult that must have been, especially as you sort of mentioned, starting your journey right in the midst of the pandemic. That already was such a difficult experience for us to all sort of navigate and get through. And, we're still sort of going through it. So that's so interesting to see. And am really excited to see how your sort of journey in youth activism translate from the pandemic to what we're going to essentially call as, I'm going to put it in quotations, our new normal. So that'll be a really interesting and exciting change. But I think the one question that I sort of have right at the top of my head is when you were sort of going through and engaging in Voices of Tomorrow, what kept you going and what kept you sort of inspired to keep pushing through with this initiative? Just because, like you mentioned, I touched base on it, the pandemic was really hard for anybody to sort of live through. So especially on top of that, to continue activism through the pandemic, what kept you going? What kept you pushing?
Thank you so much for this question. This is a question I really like, and I'll be able to share. So my passion for equality and inclusion was what kept me going. I knew that this project advocates for inclusion and that this project was striving to create a place where everyone feels like they could achieve their dreams and goals, regardless of the circumstances they're in. I saw this one video on social media, I think TikTok, where somebody who had a disability was working at Starbucks and they were treated poorly by their coworkers, employers, and no one helped that person individual.
Have you seen this?
Do you want to describe that a little bit, Matthew, instead of, because I don't think if anyone will, or if everyone will have an opportunity to watch it. It's okay.
Sorry. But if you want, I could just share my screen so I could show it to you.
How about you describe it?
Yeah, it's like this little, this miserable. So Yeah, this is one song that caught me on my attention called I Dreamed a Dream. Pretty interesting yet tragic.
I like that title. That sounds like a lot of what Sarah, Alex, Shreya, and I are talking about, Dream to Dream. And what was mentioned in the chat, that's where it all starts.
Yeah, because like I managed to search this up though, really. I've been listening to it since the lockdown, really.
Yeah, and that's a great way of keeping yourself motivated. Like Shreya asked Sarah, what keeps you going through hardship and activism, through hardship in life? So a motivational song is a wonderful outlet. And thank you for sharing that, Matthew.
Yeah, I just thought maybe you guys might want to see this by the time this is over, though.
Thank you.
Jade, I noticed that your hand is up. Feel free to unmute and share.
Hi, thanks again. I just wanted to ask what are ways an individual can get more involved in becoming an activist, like any tips or tricks you have to, like I said, get involved more, become, open. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but become more of an activist in your community.
Yeah, like Shreya said, stay tuned in the chat because we're gonna talk about our group. But very like basics. Look, like there's a lot of things that you don't realize are happening in your community, like the public library. I know you're from Windsor, Jade. The public library has, I see flyers all the time for things. So if our group isn't the niche or isn't what you're passionate about, there is 1,000 different places. Like Shreya was explaining to me, Facebook, the groups there, that's an online support during COVID. There's a group for everything. There's a passion for everything. And there's even your niche, no matter what it is, if it's a sibling of someone with a disability, if it's an intersecting identity of someone with a disability, if it's a educational perspective on disability, there's so many different niches, but also big groups. So I would look at your community organizations, what you have right at home. And then if you like large scale stuff, like CLO is an example of for people with intellectual disability, but they focused on youth in one section. So there's niches everywhere. And I know it's might be overwhelming if you just Google youth group, but there's a lot of good resources in your hometown to look. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, and I think on that note, we're sort of going to move quickly into our what sort of YAC does. And again, Michelle, thank you so much for sort of tuning in from Edmonton. That's amazing to hear. I hope you had a great conversation. But we're sort of going to get now into the nitty gritty of what YAC does for activism.
Yeah, so I'll present the siblings initiatives. So I'm part of Sibling Citizens with a Cause. So it's a young siblings group at CLO, so mostly teenagers and young adults. So this started in 2021 with a workshop that was run by Reaction for Inclusion, and it gathered over 20 siblings from around the province. And that discussion led to the creation of the report of recommendations, which was presented to the ministry and also to other organizations, like big gatherings of organizations. And following this, we decided to lead more projects that were specifically supporting siblings. So this is how we got the siblings meetup started. And I think I already talked about the creation of that. But from February to June, we created monthly siblings meetup. So virtually we had a safe meeting space, and we would spend the time to talk about one topic. So we talked about employment or uncertainties and advocacy. And these were very successfully had over 15 siblings join us. And now we're done our siblings meetup series, and we're really excited to have new initiatives coming in the fall. Hopefully that'll look like some workshops, definitely some more meetups, and hopefully an updated report of recommendations to come.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'm so inspired and love with what you do with the Siblings Project. So this is Voices of Tomorrow. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I gave a brief description on the story behind it. Now I'm going to share my screen and show you guys the survey, that the whole infographic that has all the information that we gathered. So we want to ensure that youth of all abilities are heard by sharing their voices and experiences around employment with employers in our community. And we as student leads ensure that voice youth is heard in our community by surveys, providing employment with more skills and education around what youth want. So I'm going to share my screen right now. There, can you guys see it? So here I'm just going to give a brief description on what we found. So this over here is what we found for students. So we found the barriers and challenges that youth have when finding employment. One is transportation, there's lack of guidance and support, COVID-19 restrictions, because this was created in 2020, 2021, lack of options and language barriers. Windsor is a very diverse population where there are many languages spoken. So this was expected when I saw this. So we found that 49.5% of high school students and 60% of post-secondary students affirm that it's difficult for youth of all abilities to find employment today. So we also gathered some thoughts and what people of students had to say. And one was how we asked them why it's important for people of all abilities to be hired. And one of the students said, allows for an upbringing and progression of the workplace. Working together overcomes adversity and helps to achieve desired goals. This was very helpful for us because it made us realize that everyone wants people of all abilities to be hired. Everyone wants everyone to have a meaningful employment. So this is what another thing that encouraged us and motivated us, ensure that everyone got this. Over here, we have the employer's perspectives of meaningful employment. And in this section, I'm going to talk about is they worry about these three things. They worry about how it could cost more. They worry about not knowing how to support someone with disability, so lack of education, and staff not having time to provide for support. So we hope to share these results and really create resources that will help employers and educate them on how to support someone with disability. And in this section, we have educators' perspectives on meaningful employment. So teachers share what they believe will help students overcome barriers in this section. So they believe that more community partnerships and engaging platforms to connect with employers and businesses for co-op opportunities. They believe transportation costs to be covered by the school for those who need it. Like I mentioned before, transportation was a main challenge for students. So teachers believe that transportation costs being covered can help students get to co-op opportunities, can get to their workplace, which will eventually help them enjoy their work, but not having to stress and worry about the transportation cost. Yeah, that's just pretty much a brief description of it. If you guys are willing to learn, if you guys want to find out more about the survey, you guys can definitely check out the podcast here that Payal put in the chat. This podcast, we talked more about a survey, and I also had my other member, Natalia. She also worked with me on this, so we both share our thoughts on the survey and give a really good description on everything, the whole process, the whole survey, the infographic, and you guys can check it out. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Sarah and Alex. These are my wonderful YAC members and friends. And so as the chair, I'm going to circle back to our group a little bit more because those are both amazing things that were inspired by our group and branched off and created those connections. But so social nights. So COVID was hard. COVID is hard. It's hard being online as a young person. But I want to talk about how the Youth Advisory Committee isn't just a group of activists. We are a safe space for youth with and without disabilities. I did not come in here as the chair. I came in here as that scared little 14-year-old, and I found that safe space that was already created by the leaders before me who are now the community living council members and board of directors. But that safe space is contagious. Alex and Sarah, personally, I know over the last few years, we've shared a lot of things that maybe we wouldn't share, but we found that safe space together. And so one way I try to foster this, and we all do, is with game nights and social events that really made us more comfortable with each other and comfortable confiding in each other, because we are pretty far apart. We are on computer screens. And if you've ever been in an online class, nobody wants to turn their camera on or talk, and that's fine. But that's not how you get community discussions, especially with what we're looking at. So we made that space. We created that to happen. And at the Youth Advisory Committee, you find a second family who shares the same interests and values as you. So it's not just a group of teenagers or preteens or young adults. It's people who share the same core values as you. So if you're here, I'm going to assume you care about inclusion. That's my very basic assumption. This group cares about inclusion. What a great connecting point to start off on. As you've heard, Alex, Sarah, and I have very different life stories, very different ways we got involved, and very different motivations for this. But we have that common ground of not only being around the same age, but having some similar morals and interests. This group helped so much during COVID, not just for the virtual things we've done, but to have a connection. Every other Monday, I got to log on and see my friends. And as someone who started university online and is still online, that was tough. I didn't know any of my classmates, but Sarah goes to the same school I do. Now I know one person from University of Windsor. Alex goes to the same school my friend's sister goes to. There, that's a connection. I found that connection during COVID, when most people had the opposite. So this group, those casual social nights, like we said, even small changes change. The change we've made as our small group, just impacting each other, it's worthwhile enough. So it's been amazing, really. I really think our social nights are a key component of why we work. So on that note, as the chair, I'm going to plug something. So if you've liked what we've been talking about and you're interested, like I know we had a question, how do I get involved? Here you go. We are accepting new positions. If in any form, leadership, if you've never had any experience, that's fine. That's how we all came. I believe we're 13 to 29 because we are the Youth Advisory Committee. Community Living has the council, which I believe is, I would check Community Living's website. I believe it's after our age group for the Youth Advisory Committee, but 13 to 29. So a very big range for youth at every stage of youth. But if you want to work with like-minded people, like I said, in the community that we've created, like I think you've got to see today, we are accepting new registrations. The link was shared by Payal so wonderfully. Thank you. Feel free to click on it there. And we're going to give our contact information at the end too, if you have questions before you put that in. But it's older than 29. The council is the space for anyone over 29. It's not exactly similar to what we do, but if you're an adult looking to support the Youth Advisory Committee, we do have, I think we're going to talk about it, a newsletter that will be going out again soon. And you can subscribe to Reaction for Inclusion's events and stuff, or to CLO in general, and we get shared there too. So if you're on Facebook, social media, anything like that, we'll plug all that at the end. But so if you're seeing this and you're like, man, I'm not 29, this is pointless to me, or I don't want to be on a council, there's other ways to stay engaged with us and to be aware when stuff like this is happening again. We're constantly on the move. As you can tell, we're passionate, and when we have the right assistance, we can do anything. So we have a lot of events that'll happen in the future. Alex hinted at it with siblings. Like if that's something you're interested to, subscribe to the newsletter so you can see when that's coming up again. Email us once in a while. Like we are, if you can't register or don't want to fully commit, we are an open group for anyone who can support us through attending or who wants to be a leader in the group. There's so many options. So again, Payal shared the link, I believe. It's a little bit up now. You'll have to scroll, but yeah. And there again, Alex, you're on fire. Thank you. So that's the link. Feel free to save it. think about it a little if you don't want to just jump on it now, but if you do, we're open. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to chat with you. And I'll pass it over to Shreya.
Yeah, I think the youth advisors have done an excellent job sort of highlighting really the perks and only the perks that come with being part of the youth advisory committee. I think for somebody who didn't know about the youth advisory committee until around a month ago, I'm on board. I'm just dying at the chance to make myself a partner and a member, part of the youth advisory committee. So I think right now we really don't have any deadline on when you need to submit your application. So if at any time, you have a question or something comes up, please, of course, shoot us an email and we'll give our contact information at the end. And you can also stay by for a little bit if you want to have a quick conversation one-on-one about what it looks like to be on the YAC and a little bit more of a deep perspective on it. But I think before I sort of continue my ramble on what an amazing opportunity really joining the Youth Advisory Committee is, just want to quickly plug on my end a little bit of a feedback form. So I just want everyone to quickly check their their Zoom boxes. It's just a quick feedback form for us, because we do put a lot of effort into making these webinars inclusive and representative of your wants and needs. So we just want to know how you felt about today's session, and sort of give us feedback so that we can sort of apply that into every next initiative that we sort of put out. I promise you it won't take you more than 2 minutes, and even if it does, we really do value your opinion. So it'd be amazing if you could sort of put in your feedback. I've tried to make the comments and the questions as small as they can, because I know that questions can get very tedious. So whenever you sort of get the chance, please feel free to sort of, if you click the link right now, it'll actually just take you to your Chrome page or whatever internet browser that you're using. So if you don't have the chance to fill out the feedback now, it'll at least be there for you and you'll be able to fill it out whenever you can. But I think on that note, we do come, unfortunately, to the end of our webinar today. I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody for coming out and listening and supporting our youth advisors. They put in a lot of time working on this presentation for you all, and I think we as a general team really do hope that you took something important from today. But I think I'm going to hand it back to the youth advisors, and of course, like we've mentioned before, feel free to stick around if you have a couple of questions about contacting us, getting involved with the YAC. But just wanted to sort of give my thank you, and thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day. I know it's a summer evening, so we really do appreciate you taking time out of your day. And also a huge shout out to the youth advisors, Nicole, Alex, and Sarah. You guys have done immense work with this webinar, and I know that you'll continue to do amazing work. And now we're sort of opening it up to new people to sort of join the movement and join what Nicole, Alex, and Sarah are doing. Really what we wanted to provide you is with an opportunity to get involved with youth activism as we're sort of discussing the pros and the cons. I can assure you with YAC, at least with our the community and the family that's fostered here, there only is pros. I haven't seen a single con. I won't ever see a single con. So I'm going to sort of give it back to the youth advisors just to check in on all of you and make sure to sort of answer any questions. But again, thank you on my end.
Yeah, thank you. So you see our socials there. All of our personal emails are there. As we said in the chat, connect with us. But if you have any questions right now, I know we're over time, but I personally can stay a bit longer. Alex and Sarah, whatever you have to do if you can stay. Is there any questions from any level? Our personal stories, our things we've created and have ongoing. Do you want to know more about what got us into it? Or if you want to ask like, hey, how do I get on the Instagram page? We're here. So any questions right now, chat, in person, comments even, if you want to say Loved it. Thanks. Whatever you guys, I see lots of wonderful things in the chat, so thank you. But feel free. Yeah, Jack, I see your hands up.
Did you guys get bullied in high school when you guys were in high school?
Well, I personally, yeah, in grade school, honestly, too. And it was for different reasons for everyone. Bullying is such a universal struggle. And sometimes it creates a powerful leader who wants to fight it. And sometimes it really puts down a person and slows their process in that. So I personally can answer yes. Alex, Sarah, you can if you would like to. You do not have to. But yeah, that was one way I started feeling connected with the disabled community, is because of bullying that I went through. I know that's like so personal, TMI, but thank you, Jack. Yeah, that's a huge connector for a lot of people. Thank you, Sarah, so much. Love you so much. Thank you for being here and being you. I'm so glad you guys all got to hear from her, man. That report is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I encourage you to scroll back up and find that link because it is powerful. It is eye-opening. It is really wonderful.
Yeah, to answer, I think it was Jack's question. I wasn't directly bullied, but I definitely saw things in my school that made me really frustrated. And I saw situations where it made me want to reach out and help people. And it definitely also kind of lit that passion for advocacy and inclusion as well.
Yeah, I see another hand up. Sarah, thank you for sharing. Please go ahead.
I was just wondering, you've mentioned your positions on YAC, and you've also mentioned your busy like academic schedules as well in your various universities. I was just wondering how you kind of shaped your academics or your YAC schedule and like how you balance both.
Yeah, so what we did when I was first elected as chair, because that's a great question, as all of us can admit, planning this webinar, we had to find a lot of time in our schedules with some later meetings, some less than ideal timings, but that's what you do when we're planning it. But for the general YAC meetings, we came to a consensus that evenings, like late, like 7 to 8, is the time where everyone can do their very best to be free. There's always times where life comes up, but especially during the worst of COVID, we found we had the highest turnout around that time. So we did to get that kind of consensus, because obviously if one person, like me being there, isn't more valuable than anyone else being there. So we really wanted to make it everyone could. We did some doodle polls where people can vote in and put their times. We had some open discussions about what people in their life can maybe move around. Obviously, school's something you can't really move around. So since we have that wide range of ages, 13, that's maybe grade 8, a lot of them high school. 29, you could be long out of school and in employment. So we understand that it doesn't work for everyone, but what we do is every other Monday from 7 to 8 right now. But that was decided on probably over a year ago, so it might be time for some reconsidering, or it might not be. But personally, I've just forever blocked off Monday evenings from 7 to 8 because this is something I really care about. But there's times in my life like I have to do something at that time. I have an obligation. So a tip is like, be compassionate with yourself. If you can't make it, or if you got to focus on school, nothing's being let down, nothing's going wrong, but balancing it, I would recommend talking to other people in the group as well, if that's what you're interested in. Or like I said, we are flexible at times. We're not set in stone. As life is not set in stone, we know schedules change. Summer is very different for people. So it's always fluid, but I know I went on a ramble. I hope that answered your question.
It did, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. I saw Jonathan's hand first and then Jade's.
Thank you, Nicole. First of all, for having me tonight, I appreciate. My second question is to be a YAC member. How long is a term, basically?
Great question. So we are in a bit of a transitional stage. We do not have things lined out in fine print. So currently, I'm the chair. I believe I've been for a bit over a year now. So it's obviously time for re-elections, for talking to people, but that's why we do the registrations first. But that is not set in stone yet. The Council of Community Living, I know, has that very, not rigid, I'm not going to say that, but organized, that might be a better term, as we are a lot of teenagers, a bit more organized structure to it. So that is something that we're considering moving forward, of having an open conversation about what should our structure look like? Should it be casual and free flowing, or should we have those set terms like you mentioned there? So I can't answer that. We don't have one, but that is something that we are very aware needs to be discussed.
Okay then, and I just have one question. Do you have to pay to join the YAC program, or is it like completely free? Just wondering.
It is completely free. It's completely free. If you have a computer to get on, which it looks like you do, you got some nice headphones too. It's all you have to do is click on a Zoom link right now. There was times where there was stuff in person, but that is obviously a conversation about accommodating some costs to make that accessible to youth. But we're free. We're here. No cost. Come on, join.
Sounds good. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for having me tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Jonathan. You're a familiar face to some of these events, so I'm really happy to see you've seen the continued value in this. So thank you.
Same back to you as well.
Thank you. I see Jade's hands up again.
This is a little unrelated, but this is a question for Alex. I'm currently in Moncton. I'm doing an internship here at the university, and I only have about a month left here. And I was wondering if you have any recommendations to do out here on the East Coast.
Gosh, it's too bad. I'm gonna be there in like 2 months, so we're just gonna miss each other. Oh, recommendations. Well, I always hear they have to go see the tidal bore because it's beautiful. I never got to go, and I definitely regret it. So that's my #1 plan next year. And it only comes in like twice a day, so it's a really cool moment. And there's some really good restaurants downtown. If you just walk down like the Red Road, yeah, definitely go to the Pump House. It's amazing, and Pink Sushi is really good too.
Noted. Thank you so much.
Fun fact, Jade is my best friend's sister. So when I said in Moncton, that's who I'm always referring to. Connections, man, even virtual. Look at us.
That's a great connection.
I have to go right now, but thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for joining, Jade. It means a lot.
Have a good night.
You too. Yeah, so if you ever want to hit up Jade. Is there anything else? I know a lot of people had to leave, obviously. We've gone a bit over. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I have an unrelated question. When is our committee getting a pay raise?
Oh, yeah. Cameron, I love you, man.
Right there.
Cameron's asking the hard-hitting questions. Maybe we can have a pizza party.
There we go.
One. Yeah.
There we go.
Cameron's one of the wonderful people you get to meet in the Youth Advisory Committee, who keeps me on top of my game, keeps me sharp, and is an example, because we have a lot of women in our group. So having Cameron and his perspective as a young man really, again, shows inclusion, diversity, how it just happens naturally within this group. I love Cameron. Thank you for joining and for being silly. Is there anything else? I know we've kept you guys. Shreya, if there's anything else you want to say?
No, I'm honestly just in awe of just being able to listen in on all these conversations. But I think Payal actually has something to say to everyone.
Yeah, I think Jack had his hand up there. I'm not sure. Jack?
Well, next year I am moving up there. So next year we should make a plan to go to Canada's Wonderland for the whole group.
I like your thinking. I like
That's
that
a great
thinking.
idea. Yeah.
You know, there's a distant goal and on a back burner right now of getting us connected to get together again in person. Obviously, that has to happen after our registrations, after all that fun stuff. But Canada's Wonderland, I can make it. Jonathan?
Yeah, I just have one more question. So going forward for the webinars, are they going to be held in person or is there going to be like a hybrid or like a in person and also a virtual option as well? I'm just sort of like looking forward to the future.
Yeah, great question. So we don't have any future webinars planned right now. So I can't speak on behalf of YAC, but I know Community Living has started to integrate stuff back in person. Their annual general meeting and conference is in person this year, and it wasn't last year. So some stuff, if you're involved with Community Living at different levels, some stuff is moving back in person. YAC does not have any big things planned as of now because we had to work on this first. And so eventually, I know Reaction for Inclusion years before COVID did some in-person events that were wonderful, and I would love to see those up and running again. But obviously, we're just still going to debrief from this event, take in our registrations, and move forward. So I don't have an answer to that for now.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Jonathan. Scott, I saw your hand up first.
Will you all be able to attend the Community Living Conference in September?
So fun fact, we're speaking at the conference.
Oh,
no way.
Yeah.
You have a session?
We do. We're talking about engaging youth voices for meaningful activism. I might have butchered the title. Alex and I will be there. Cameron will be there. You're going to see, yeah, we will be there.
Hopefully I'll be able to go to that session.
Yes, and hopefully we'll be able to connect.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Matthew.
Yeah, it's been fun. I'll give you that. It's been really fun.
I am so glad because my personal approach to leadership is fun, casual. You can probably tell how I'm talking, maybe my room. So I'm really happy that you were engaged the whole time, Matthew. I really appreciate your constant comments and questions. You showed that you're very alert and you're listening. So thank you. And I'm glad you enjoyed it as well. That means so much. It really does. We are youth for youth. So we want it to be fun. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll be off. Besides, but hey,
all good.
At least I had fun though around here.
I'm so glad, Matthew, and I hope to see you at something else we do in the future.
Of course.
Thank you so much for joining.
Gmail when you need me.
We will. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. See ya.
Bye, Matthew. On that note, I know we're going down a little bit in numbers, obviously. We're quite a bit over. Any final statements, things that anyone wants to give?
Yeah, I just had one question from earlier. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but it's about your story, Nicole.
Yes.
You said at one point you grew up not having bias, and yet you also, in the same presentation, said you have a different perspective as a white woman versus a Black woman. So my question is, how could you have grown up with no bias and yet at the same time say you have a different perspective? I'm not trying to be rude here, but doesn't that seem a bit hypocritical to you?
Yes, no, absolutely. So I guess what I meant more when I say I grew up without bias, I grew up without witnessing bias. So we live in I live in Windsor. It's the port of immigration. It's the port of diverse cultures from Detroit to people trying to move elsewhere in Canada. So what I meant by that statement more so was I am so lucky that I was surrounded by a lot of people who didn't share a lot of negative biases. Obviously, like not obviously, because I stated it wrong. So thank you. Obviously, as a white woman, I have implicit biases. I meant more my perspective as a white woman, meaning like my experiences. That's the word I should have used. My experiences as a white woman, I know are very privileged. And you're right, I did not grow up without bias. That's not a thing. I misspoke there. More so, I was so lucky to be in a community that didn't have a lot of the biases that some other young white people might have had in different cities. Shreya and I had a long talk about this the other night. I love Windsor. It is so culturally diverse. And that's kind of where I was going at with that I appreciate the culture I grew up in and got to witness, but also still recognizing my place as a white woman in it. But Cameron, like I said, thank you. I get speaking sometimes and I mess up. So thank you.
Yeah, I didn't want to call you out during the presentation. That's why I asked at the end.
You're too sweet. Thank you, Cameron. I appreciate it. Keeping me on my toes, always.